Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're going week to week watching one of your streaming favorites and currently covering a couple of things here on the podcast. Specifically, in this episode, we're talking about the second episode of this third, and I believe would be final season of Euphoria. And joining me for the conversation, as with the previous conversation, Darren. How are you doing, Darren?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, Victor. Back at work this week, so back to normality and back to the grind. But made space to watch Euphoria last night and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of interlocking material here, like late capitalism, interesting this week and something I will definitely touch upon in our conversation, really juxtaposing. I don't think you've caught up on this one yet, Darren, but really interesting juxtaposing the vision of this hustle culture and the commodification of sex and of just how we are all in some ways, selling off parts of ourselves just for the climb that next rung of the ladder. And is it ever enough? Like that question that's being asked. And of course, we have Beef, which premiered this week, and we were just discussing it a little bit before we started recording. But the show I wanted to bring up that is really an interesting, opposite side of the coin to this Euphoria show is Margot's Got Money Trouble on Apple TV Plus. And Darren, I don't think you've watched any of this yet, correct?
Incorrect. I've actually watched the first episode or most of the first episode because I cancelled Apple TV, but you can watch first episodes of most of the shows on there, even without a subscription. So I sampled that for sure.
I will hook you up with a coupon or something because I have so many coupons because I have Apple TV already and someone's sharing it with me now that it's very cool, by the way, that Apple does this. I was paying for Apple TV because we cover so much Apple TV content. Someone else in my friend group could share subscriptions with other people. Someone else in my friend group actually activated their subscription because they're watching soccer on the soccer league. And because I'm in that friend group, I automatically got Apple TV as part of their subscription because I'm in their share group. And Apple said, we are no longer charging you for your subscription. So I'm like, wow, they're not double dipping. They could easily double dip. Like Netflix would never do something like that. They'll definitely double charge me. And I was like, wow, that's very convenient. But anyway, long story short is every time I go to AMC, I get a coupon for, because I have an AMC Plus subscription, they give me a free Apple TV. Constantly, they give me 3 months, 6 months free subscriptions, and I already have one for free anyway. So, Darren, next time I get one of those coupon codes, I will send it to you immediately so you can have.
Oh yeah, hook us up.
Definitely, I'll hook you up with it so you can watch more of the show. Curious, since you did watch it, what did you think of that first episode?
I was enjoying it. It just, I don't know. Some of the characters didn't really flesh it out for me, like Michelle Pfeiffer's character. I thought was a little bit caricature-y, and I thought the whole kind of vibe was, I couldn't get the vibe quite yet, but that's very typical of first episodes of series. But the Elle Fanning, she's delightful, isn't she? I haven't really seen, she's just seems like she's popped onto the map in the last year or two. I've seen her in lots of things, Sentimental Value, and she's in the Predator movie. But yeah, she's cool, and it's a good juxtaposition with Euphoria because it does, seem to introduce this OnlyFans thing in a different way. So yeah, I'm stoked. I'm seeing great reviews for this series. So yeah, I'm stoked to check out more of it.
I mentioned it briefly when I introduced it in the previous episode, but I was kind of surprised that the audio. I mean, I guess at South by Southwest they showed the first 3 episodes, I believe, which basically is 2 hours long. The 3 episodes cut into, it's like a 2-hour movie. And this is specifically, Apple premiered 3 episodes of the show, and I understand why. And it's interesting how, unlike Netflix, of course, always does a full binge drop, and Apple always goes week to week. I shouldn't say that, not always. I mean HBO always goes week to week, no matter whether maybe things should be more of a binge or, for example, maybe DTF should have been, the last 2 episodes should have dropped at the same night. If I could have my druthers, that's how I think I would have them do it. But HBO always goes week to week. Doesn't matter if the chair company is probably more of a binge, but nope, they do week to week. That's just how they do it, right? So there's these really hard and fast rules. I find Apple interesting that they are willing to mix it up, we'll do 3 episodes, then we'll do 2 episodes, then we go week to week, and then we have 2 at the end. They mix it up. And it really seems that they write based on how they're going to drop the episodes. And I mention all of that because Margot's Got Money Troubles dropped 3 episodes rather than the usual 2 that they do. And the third episode ends. The end of the third episode is she has like finally committed to do the OnlyFans. She has opened her account, and it's a very funny button on the episode, which I won't say it here because she says something foul language, but it's very funny. And it's basically that she gets her first subscription, let's say, in the final moments of that third episode, and it's very funny. And but to the point of comparing it to Euphoria, where you're seeing all these sex workers are all in dire straits and maybe doing it for the wrong reasons and maybe manipulating each other. And it's going to be, I mean, the strippers, of course, always have like a very, you have an OD already. So things are already very bad on that side of things. And theoretically, you could imagine a vision of the OnlyFans world where at least these people have more autonomy over their actions. But I have a feeling that Euphoria, of course, is going to eventually show this in the most negative light possible. But when on the Margot show, when she goes to investigate OnlyFans, because people are telling her it's not actually always porn, the montage of different types of creators is non-sexual. Like, you see these girlfriends lying together on like a sofa, and they're like laughing and making fun of like a TV show they're watching, and people pay to watch while, hanging out with them basically. And it really has like a very communal feel. And it's as if people want to support these creators. And it has and that's probably an idealized version of it, which may get complicated over the course of that series as well. But I just find it very funny that Euphoria is coming at it from the exact opposite direction. And maybe they'll meet in the middle, who knows? But they're now coming from totally different directions. And I find that really interesting. And you haven't gotten around to this, but Nick Offerman also has now introduced by episode 3. And he's a former professional wrestler. And the show is definitely paralleling that, this is not him. This is the character he played as a wrestler. And there's like an element of performance to it. And also these are themes that we see in this specific episode of Euphoria. But another interesting aspect to it where it's just like, yes, this is all a performance. And then are we all performing to get that job, to, performing at work? Are we like faking it till we make it? And there's all these questions about, just performance. That's something that we're all doing. And of course, that intersects with beef as well. The whole idea of this performative, how everyone's always performing for somebody else. So anyway, all these themes, all in these shows at the same time. I'm not even going to bring up Your Friends and Neighbors, which is another layer to this as well. But fascinating. This late stage capitalism is infecting all these shows simultaneously. But all that is to say, Margot Has Money Trouble. First 3 episodes. Do stick it out for the 3. I enjoyed it a lot, especially that 3rd episode.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I was waiting for Nick Offerman to show, and I didn't actually see him.
Yeah, he doesn't show up until later. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of things dropping 2 or 3 episodes at a time, so you can really just get into it, and then you're really waiting week to week. So I quite like that format of doing it. And I was a bit worried with Euphoria how it's showing OnlyFans like in a dated format. Like it seems like we've explored that years and years ago. So I am interested in continuing with Margot to see that it's a little bit more modern. I know just in the sport that I follow of surfing, there's a few surfers that are on OnlyFans that I have no idea what they're doing, like workout tips or something. But it is interesting that there are other things involved in that platform that could be of interest to people. It's just the porn stuff is everywhere, and it's the only thing that you think about when you think of that platform.
It is very funny. That's basically the only way we see it. And by the way, everything that we see even in Margot Has Money Troubles, it is like sex adjacent, and like it's kind of teased in this very episode of Euphoria as well, that this is still not quite that level of, explicit sexuality. Although once again, I have a feeling that inevitably this is going to be a toxic relationship between Cassie and her OnlyFans fans eventually, but that all remains to be seen. So
yeah, it always sounds like it's a slippery slope. Like you start off showing feet or bikini pics, and then to keep getting the subscriptions, you got to get further and further down that rabbit hole until you're, God knows, dressing up like a baby.
This is the punchline of the 3rd episode. I'm not going to spoil it. It's very funny. So I'll let people discover it on the actual service that Elle Fanning actually starts on the OnlyFans.
I'm very interested to see the angle that she takes.
I mean, it's relatively innocent, but it's so funny the way it all plays out. And I'm sure it'll get funnier as the show progresses. And I'm sure her content is going to get more explicit as well. So a couple things to bring up ahead of time. First of all, I'm curious to see whether people are going to stick it out with Euphoria. Just some kind of information for anybody who follows these type of things. The premiere episode had 8.5 million views. This was a huge premiere. Not only was it much bigger than the season 2 premiere, but it is like it's bigger than the premiere of the Night of Seven Kingdoms. It's like it's in the pantheon of The Last of Us, or the very first season of House of the Dragon, even bigger than the second season of House of the Dragon. So massive audience for the show. Not surprising, these people have all become incredibly famous since then. But I'll tell you that I was a little concerned covering the show here on the podcast, and we'll see how it all pays out, considering it's a relatively short season. But I've only brought up Euphoria a couple of times on the podcast, has not really gotten traction with our listeners, so maybe we're not the right audience for it. But just the trend line in our downloads, we've had some of our most popular episodes ever have been coming back to back between the Paradise wrap-up and then DTF got very popular here on the podcast. And then The Pit, which had been pretty quiet, became very popular. So everything's just been like one after the other, like nearly having record audiences from week to week. So it's been very popular recently. And then we do Euphoria. And the first couple of days, Euphoria is like tracking like gangbusters. And by the end of the week, the audience is not turning up anymore. And I always think about, like, for example, when DTF, our ratings kept going up from week to week, and it turned out that show was growing from week to week in the ratings. I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing it with our downloads as well. Seeing Euphoria open huge and then just kind of trickle away by the end of the week. I'm like, I wonder how many people are really going to stick for this show through the audience. And I don't follow this on social media. I don't know. Have you seen what's your feel of the reaction among people who watch the show, or if you have any kind of insight into it?
The only feel that I'm seeing news articles criticizing it quite heavily, with specifically the portrayal of Sydney Sweeney dressing up as the baby. So there seems to be latching on to that type of thing and saying this show sucks because of this representation in this era where pedophilia is apparently rampant, or it makes the news anyway that they shouldn't be doing something like this, where I feel like that kind of angle misses the point. I feel like yesterday's episode kind of nipped that in the bud. She was doing that because she's completely naive and has no idea about how to get subscribers to her platform. So yeah, negative is what I'm seeing straight up. But after watching 2 episodes of the show, it's a thrilling ride. I think it's so entertaining to watch, specifically the filmmaking, and also seeing these big stars doing these characters for when they were not so big. I think it's super interesting, and I'm not turned off that much so far. So I'm still in.
Yeah, I had a pretty mixed reaction to yesterday's episode, I should say, in the fact that, and I'm still interested in the show for sure, especially such a short season. I mean, I keep saying that, but it's true, right? Like, if this is going to be 10 episodes, I'm like, I don't know if I could handle it. I may wear out its welcome, but this seems like such an abbreviated show. And I am intrigued by what I'm seeing, even the bad elements of it. But this was interesting. I can almost like bifurcate the things I liked about the episode and not right along the way they're using, Rue's character, in the fact that the whole beginning, and tell me if you felt the same way, the whole beginning of this episode where we have her narrating and she's like telling us what's been happening with the other kids that she graduated with. And like, even knowing things that are happening in their personal lives, like she's an omniscient narrator, which I find like fascinating. It's as if she's writing something fiction. And by the way, if she's writing a novel that this is what the setup is for this show, I'd read that novel, right? So I like that. And like I said, it doesn't make sense that she would know some of the things that supposedly she's narrating, but maybe she's just using her imagination to fill in blanks. But I loved that part of the show. And then with the same character, when she is the protagonist, some of this stuff that's happening in the strip club is all the more like heavy-handed. And, honestly, it makes me think of, for maybe the first time ever watching this show, makes me think about Ryan Murphy shows in the tone of some of the stuff that's being presented in her working at the strip club, and this whole like vision of California as hell. I mean, this like is really overtly being illustrated. Like, this guy's the devil. She literally calls him the devil at one point. And the temptation in the desert, I'm sure there's some kind of biblical reference there as well. But yeah, so some of this stuff didn't work for me. But honestly, like the stuff where we're kind of just seeing these other people's lives from Rue's distant point of view, I kind of love that tone of the show. And maybe that's where it works the best for me.
Interesting you bring up Ryan Murphy. Yeah, I didn't get that feeling, and I hope I don't. I'm thinking it was more like a Tarantino or
very much
Boogie,
so, yeah.
Boogie Nights.
That's what he's going for. That's what he's going for.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But I did enjoy this episode for seeing more of Maddie. Maddie's one of my favorite characters. I think I love her confidence and the way that she likes to manipulate the world. And also we see Jules as well, who's this kind of mysterious character. Incredible actor, incredible kind of character that you never see on screen. And I have no idea anything about her. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing more of her. And Rue, she's just holding it down. Who else? We haven't really seen Jacob Elordi much at all. He doesn't do really anything. He's just like the daddy. And I'm enjoying Sydney Sweeney kind of taking the piss out of her own persona as well, her own public persona, just to a T. It's brilliant. That scene with her and Maddie by the pool, I loved their interactions. So yeah, I'm getting a bit out of it.
Yeah, I think that there's some really interesting stuff. I mean, this is always the thing with Sam Levinson in general, with the way he writes. It's very heavy-handed. He's definitely going for a Tarantino feel. The reason I thought about Ryan Murphy, believe it or not, is, did you by chance see his show, I think it was last year, Grotesquerie? Did you watch that?
Nope, didn't see it.
It is, I don't recommend it. I really don't. But it is such a bizarre show. And you had a police detective who's, investigating a serial killer in California, and it is, as if something biblical end of times is coming, and it's all set in the desert, and there's a lot of like this really over the top, very garish type of desert scenery that makes you think about something apocalyptic. And that's where, I mean, it really feels like so many things thematically and visually are borrowed here from Grotesquerie and also set in California. So it's really weird. I hadn't made that connection until I was watching the second episode, that maybe this was part of the inspiration he had, was watching Grotesquerie and then making it into his version of it. But he probably doesn't watch Ryan Murphy. But maybe it's a little more his propensity to always lean into the most grotesque elements of a story to that make me think of that. And by the way, it's not like this is a new thing for him. This has been his style before, and I've enjoyed it. I mean, I even enjoyed I'd say maybe 2/3 of The Idol. I even enjoyed, right? Not enjoyed is not the right word, but I found it interesting, I'd say. So, I mean, even aspects of that, but he obviously is always going over the top. So it is interesting. He's not subtle, of course, but a couple of things. He still is visually really puts arresting images on the screen all the time. And his writing too can be extremely heavy-handed, especially his plotting. But some of the dialogue is really intriguing. Like you mentioned, the conversation between Cassie and Maddie, and the whole idea of how she's like saying, oh, I'm doing this type of content and this kind of type of content and the baby content and all that other stuff. And she's like, why? And it's just like, because her fans asked her for more of it. So she's just doing it. And they're like, no, that's not really what works. What you need to do is you need to be yourself. And she's like, who is that? And it's like, this, who am I? She literally says, who am I? And that is, fascinating, this idea that that she doesn't know who she is and that she's just chasing some notoriety. She did it with her chasing after her husband. And now, of course, in this situation where she's like doing the same type of behavior on OnlyFans. So I'm very curious to see where this all leads. And of course, especially when she has committed to Jacob Elordi's character and how that's probably going to be a disappointment. Oh, by the way, did you see the coming attractions for next week by chance?
No, I didn't.
Not no serious spoiler here, but except for the fact that next week all the scenes were at their wedding, and I honestly would have expected the last episode of the season would be the wedding, or maybe the next to last episode. But we're in the middle of the season. They're doing the wedding already. That's a really surprising turn of events.
That is surprising. Yeah, I expected it to be the conclusion as well. We love a wedding conclusion. Just as a digression, I caught up with the drama this week because you were talking about it so much, and I was so interested into what the revelation of the lead character was, and that had a great wedding scene at the end. One of the best wedding scenes that I've seen in a long time.
That's a great satire, and especially when the Robert Pattinson character has that like breakdown at the wedding at the end. So without giving it away, obviously, were you disappointed? What did you think of the revelation that this thing, it's basically been making this into a big hit, like I mentioned to you already, like as a little box office update, that but by next week it'll have crossed $100 million worldwide, and it's still going. So it's going to make a lot more money than that, which is shocking considering how small stakes this film could be. But of course, everybody wants to know what that reveal is. What did you think of it, and how do you think it paid off dramatically? And was it from a marketing move? What did you think about like getting people in the theater to see what this thing is?
Well, it's a brilliant marketing move because I was so interested after talking to you, and I guessed something, and I think I sent you a message about what I guessed it was.
Yes. By the way, I didn't put that in my text because I didn't want to go, but I had suspected something like that as well, given maybe because of the same movie. But yes, it wasn't that, as you found out.
Yes, it wasn't like that movie Let Sleeping Dogs Lie by Bobcat Goldthwait, but there was no way I could have guessed what the character's confession would be, and it was fascinating the way they explored it. I saw this movie with my wife, the drama. We loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It was so funny, but also so terrifying. It's almost a horror movie at times, seeing these two people trying to work out their differences in a time limit because they are getting married to each other. And it's just kind of this shocking moment where you're getting married to someone, you're going to make a commitment to them, but you realize you don't actually know them or know everything about them. And one particular point in their young life, they were way off the rails. It was fascinating. And Robert Pattinson was excellent, as also Zendaya. Yeah, great film. Yeah, that's a big recommendation from me, and I loved where it fell. Maybe the very, very end was kind of a little bit cute, but it was like nothing I've seen for a long time. I'm going to chase that director down and see what else they've done.
You've never seen Dream Scenario, right? You haven't seen that?
I've not seen Dream Scenario, no.
My favorite film of his is a Danish film. I believe it's Danish. Has one of the same actors from The Worst Person in the World, by the way, who appears in so many of those films, those Danish films. But it's called Sick of Myself, I think it's called. And that's my favorite of his films. And that is another very funny comedy that is incredibly cringe-inducing. But basically, it's somebody who intercedes when someone's in a really bad spot, and she has not we can use that as a segue back into this conversation. She is this 20-something, she's obsessed with like celebrities on Instagram, and she helps this person, does something really noble, but gets a little notoriety from it, and then gets obsessed with more notoriety at any cost. And she starts doing really terrible things. She only hurts herself, by the way. She's not like hurting other people. It's not like, I don't want to make it sound like it's going to escalate into a horror film or something. It does not. But she starts doing more and more negative behavior to draw attention to herself, and she's like obsessed with it. It's like a compulsion, and it's very funny and so dark, and it really says something about just being aimlessly in this culture and trying to turn your narrative into something that's compelling for an outside audience, and like what drives that in us, right? And by the way, I want to use that as a segue right back. That's on Hulu, by the way, if anybody wants to watch it. But it is Danish, but of course subtitled. But it's so a lot of it, the language is in English. They speak a lot of English there, so. But definitely recommended. And although an uncomfortable watch for sure, but in a very different way, I do want to segue back to the idea that it's kind of what's being explored here. These people just want to have attention. This is in Euphoria, I should say, and they want to, and there's this definite paralleling of these people who are an OnlyFans, these people who are in Hollywood, but all these people are like kind of like empty vessels that are being shipped from one place to another, and they're more than happy to just kind of present a version of themselves that is pure performance. And it's, like I said, it's a big theme that's in the culture in general. And you already touched on this, but I think the thing that doesn't fit quite right, because it's a little off to the side, although it's definitely trying to be integrated, is the Nate, the Jacob Elordi character, and how his performance is that he's basically saying, oh, you have to be a certain level of wealth. And we've heard this, right, with all these scam stories that we've heard recently. You got to be really rich to invest in my company. And then it turns out it's just a pyramid scheme, right? Like they break ground on one project, they can't sell it. So now they run out of money. They're paying themselves with that money. Now they got to pay back their investors. So then they bring in more investors for some next project. And then that money gets paid out. And then it's just this, you're just continuously funding yourself with more debt. And apparently in this particular episode, we have this debt collector coming to make a call. And and now I'm going to start getting confused here and throwing in things that happen in Beef. But there's a moment where the Josh character, the Oscar Isaac character, specifically says he realizes, he's like, everybody's scamming. And both shows are saying the same thing, right? But my question to you is, when you see the Elordi character, like you mentioned, they're kind of underusing him here. Of course, they bring in his dad. We got to talk about that briefly. Of course, bringing in Eric Dane, who's already showing symptoms, of course, here when they was shooting these scenes, and of his ALS, and died tragically, of course. But his dad obviously was performing as well, a version of himself. So do you think they have figured out a way to tie that storyline into some of these other themes?
Very interesting question. Yeah, I did enjoy seeing Eric Dane there, and definitely showing signs of his illness. I mean, it was great to see him on screen. Maybe a little bit distracting because such a story behind that. But yeah, it was really great to see him and Jacob Elordi interact. I'm just wondering who's scamming me and who I am scamming in this life, if this is the modern way of doing things. How are they going to tie Jacob Elordi's character? Yeah, I don't know is the answer. Maybe that's why I'm digressing a little bit. But there's obviously going to be a bit more of a love triangle again with Maddie coming back into the picture. Yep. He seemed very defensive about Sydney Sweeney's character and Maddie.
My Maddie. My Maddie.
My Maddie, yes.
No, my Maddie. Yeah, she was my friend first.
And perhaps this wedding will bring everything to the surface quicker than expected. And maybe it's always very murky when you're dealing with people after their money and debt collectors. Perhaps they will dovetail into Rue's boss and this whole organized crime situation. Maybe it'll come together. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see. I mean, it's more thematic what they're trying to tie together. And you said who's scamming? We're all being scammed, by the way, Darren. That, my money in the stock market. I'm sure you have a lot of your money in the stock market too. And I mean, all that stuff is smoke and mirrors too. When you think about, every, the whole system could collapse, but better not, because I have a lot of money riding in there. But it's all a big shell. It's a big Ponzi scheme for to all of us. We're all in it, one way or the other.
Well,
we all have to pretend.
As long as it comes back and collapse now, I'm not retiring for a while. So as long as it comes back.
Yes, that's right. Well, I always joke about that with my wife, being like, I want it to collapse, like the housing market. I want the housing market to collapse now so that I can buy a cheap house and then ride it out into the sunset. What I don't want is to retire and then it collapses, because then I can't afford anything.
Yeah, never going to happen. I do fear for my kids how they're going to live. I just don't want them living with me when they're 30.
Well, that's what the show is, I think, talking about, right? It's talking about exactly that generation of folks. And also, this is Beef again, and this is Margot's got money trouble. It's, here in the US, there's a lot of talk about how a generation ago, my parents bought a house for and they were not college educated, and they bought a house that was worth 4 times their salary. And now, me and my wife, we are professionals who make way more money than my parents ever did, but it doesn't take 4 years' salary to buy a house now. It costs more than that. And that's for us, where we can pay for it pretty easily. But then I think about our neighbors buying a house that is in the same general ballpark as ours, a younger couple. And I'm like, can they even put enough money together to put a down payment down? And what's it going to take 10 years for them to be able to accrue that wealth, unless someone's helping them out, and then they're dependent on, their parents, the wealth of their parents. And then that's for them to put the down payment down. And then if you say, well, I need 10 years to get that money together, 10 years from now, the cost of the house is going to double again. And then where are they going to get that money? And it just seems like that now kids, if you own assets, you're doing great. If you don't own assets, like how can you ever afford to buy them without taking on a huge risk, or maybe starting an OnlyFans?
Well, that's right. I mean, the level of debt that people have these days is insane, especially in Australia, because everybody wants to own their own home, and have an investment property and have all your money in housing. It's the house of cards, as you say. And it was very interesting in Euphoria when they said there was a generation of people that were moving west during COVID or just after COVID to make their fortune, become rich, whatever that meant, even if that was just selling pictures of your body for likes and comments and subscriptions. So interesting. But you only hear about the people that are successful, which is probably the 0.01% of these people that went. And everybody else that tries to do it, well, all their naked pictures are on everywhere, but they're getting nothing for it, and they just expose themselves for no gain. It's super depressing.
Yeah, you hear like these podcasters making all this money, and then you start a podcast and you're like, man, this has just cost me money. What's going on?
Not for long, Victor. I've heard rumors of this Patreon that you're setting up.
Oh, there's a Patreon. Okay. Yes, it's live. So maybe I'll use that as a segue to announce that the Patreon is live, everybody. Anybody can subscribe now for free. And so if you want to check out the content, there's a little welcome video there and a conversation, and there'll be some more exclusive content in the Patreon. Check the show notes for the link, or just search Patreon for Need Some Introduction podcast. But so, and a lot more to come there as well. But yes, the Patreon's live, but no OnlyFans, not yet anyway. No one wants to see pictures of my feet, unfortunately. No one wants to see pictures. Definitely not my wife. She does not want to see my feet. So a couple of things you brought up that I wanted to circle back on. First of all, we talked about briefly last week how this feels like a Western in a large extent. And I think that is in Sam Levinson's kind of writing, something that he's trying to explore there. Again, is he driving home the point of like, there was nothing left for these kids at home, so they all headed west to go prospecting, right? So it's explicitly making a reference to like the West, and California being, of course, the destination of the gold rush. But just like the gold rush where, unless you were selling pics, most of the people went broke. But the one guy who said, hey, look, I found gold, lured a bunch of other people who had no other options out there. And this is like the OnlyFans model you just described, right? Like there's the one Joe Rogan podcaster and all us suckers behind him, right? So that's definitely something that's being explored there. This new West of opportunity.
Totally. I do like the character, the strip club manager Alamo. He's also dropping some knowledge about the American history of the West and all sorts of things, just here and there. So there's definitely a theme for sure.
Remember the Alamo. It is interesting that, this idea that, for example, like the black cowboys, right? Like, something like 50% of cowboys in Texas were black at one point. But of course, that's not the popular vision of it either. But there's, so there's a definitely, there maybe will be even more of an exploration of the historical West versus the illusion, that we sell or sold in the films of those like early era of the Hollywood. And of course, that's going to tie into this too, right? Hollywood is also selling image and taking advantage of these young people who have limited options and putting them into contracts where they're really ugly. And a slight metaphor for that, we could segue back into talking about specific things about the show. A slight alignment there is when we see that Maddie, during the pandemic, starts managing this girl. She's good at it. The girl starts making $700,000 a month, which we do hear these type of stories, these OnlyFans stories. And then her, a boss is like, you can't be involved with this type of thing or you're going to lose your job. And she's like, she didn't bet on herself. And she says, okay, I'm going to quit that because I need my benefits and I need to help out my mom who's lost her nail business during the pandemic. And turns out, of course, if she had been collecting just a small margin on that $700,000 a year, I'm sorry, $700,000 a month, she would have more than the salary she has now being someone's assistant. And of course, if she had one person she was managing, then she'd get two, then she'd get three. She could have had an empire of her own, but she tried to do things the more legitimate way. And I think she's learned from that, right? And now, of course, specifically in this episode, we see that she's now seeing Cassie as possibly her next golden ticket.
Yes. And Cassie believes in it herself, that she can be anyone that anyone wants her to be.
Anything at all.
Anything at all. Just tell me and I'll be myself. What do managers get? 10%? 10% of 700 grand a month is pretty tidy for old Maddie.
Pretty good. I'm sure I don't think she's making that kind of money as an assistant. That's for sure.
I would not have thought so, but I do enjoy her relationship with this actor, this young actor. He's definitely going to be playing into more of this. Maybe he's going to be a love interest for Cassie and potentially break up her marriage or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, super interesting character, Maddie. And I love the way she operates. I love the way she got the job by just barging into this lady's office and answering her phone. So fun. I love her confidence and I want to see her succeed and I want to see Cassie fail. I don't know why the show sets me up like that, but yeah, fun.
Oh, another thing I wanted to circle back on as well is very fun. And, there are things that I don't like about the show. I'm sorry, there are things I've always had issues with. I touched on last week's episode with Euphoria in general. This kind of always leaning into the most ugly elements of things. It really feels very conservative, morally conservative. But then I don't even think that he legitimately is morally conservative. I think he's just trying to get everybody riled up. So that feels a little too trollish for me. Although I'm saying all that, but of course I still like the show and I like the visuals, the cinematic elements of the show. So that's why I keep watching his shows. But I do find that is, a little bit, he's always trying to push buttons on both political stripes, right? So I think that's very much on brand for him. But sometimes this self-awareness that he brings to the show works. And he really is into pop culture and celebrity culture. And you touched on it already earlier. I love the way that it's as if we're talking about Sydney Sweeney in the character of Cassie, like the version of Sydney Sweeney that some people believe. This is like, she was the head of like her robotics team in high school. So this is not a dumb girl, but people act like she doesn't know what she's doing. She's just like out there with her boobs out, like as if like someone's pulling her strings instead of that she has that autonomy. And I love the fact that it's in the narrative of the show. She is playing someone who is clueless that way, which is what people believe about Sydney Sweeney. But I don't believe that at all. I think she's very calculated.
Yeah, I believe that too, because there was a couple of films that I watched. I forget the film, but she played like a spy. It was and she was hiding secrets or she was a whistleblower. I can't remember. It was based on a play, but she was fantastic.
That's based on a true story, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't remember the name of that film, but you'd be able to find it pretty easily. And also, she did that boxing movie last year. Again, another movie I can't remember the name of, but she was really fantastic in it. Definitely not a sex symbol. And I think she picks really smart roles depending on what her career needs, whether it's a boost as like a sexy bombshell or like an actual proper acting role. She's straddling it really well at the moment, even though she is everywhere, and we could probably just have a little less Sydney Sweeney for the next couple of years just while she reactivates or just kind of recalibrates her image. But yeah, very smart, and love that she takes the piss out of herself on this show. I mean, the writing helps, of course, but yeah, fascinating. And yeah, she's a captivating person.
A couple of things. First of all, yes, the movie you're talking about is available on HBO also. It's an HBO movie. They purchased it out of one of the film festivals in 2023. It's called Reality. And
yes.
The actor, I should say the character she's playing, the real life person, is Reality Winner, I believe it was. And this is someone who was dragged into was a whistleblower, like you said, about this government intervention in election results, I believe. And so, and she is, great performance there, like you mentioned. So she's very savvy about what she's actually doing. But, sometimes she absolutely is overexposed. But you do think about the controversy around her, ad recently. And then you see her in the soaking wet American flag outfit. And you think like that is something that maybe could have been in the actual Sydney Sweeney ad. So it is interesting that they are, playing with this iconography, of course, very intentionally.
Yes. Yeah. The jeans ad was a step too far for a lot of people.
Yes.
But hey, let's put it all out there and see what works. I mean, she says yes to everything, which is a great way to be in this kind of capitalist
just like
situation.
Cassie. I'll be whatever. And what do you think about my critique earlier about Jules and how this story of like what's happening at the strip club, is it compelling to you, as compelling versus, I mean, maybe I just want something better for Rue in general, but I like when she is talking about how tedious being an Uber driver is. You're mostly just with your thoughts. She doesn't want to be alone with her thoughts. And of course, this is what's leading to this narration of these other characters. She has, of course, is aware of this death at the compound strip club, that the girl's former girlfriend and her current hookup is now aware. She, reveals that about the overdose, and she's been trying to track down her friend this whole entire time, of course. And this is pretty heartbreaking, the revelation of it, although this character really started to annoy me with how over the top she was. But what do you think is happening there? Speaking of this kind of hellscape version of California we're seeing here, do you buy that this is a rehab?
I do not. I understand your criticism about this whole stripper world, but I kind of liked it. I like the money man in the back room. He's had the job for 15 years and we don't know. We don't want to know. We don't want to know the jobs that he's had before that. And I am stretching credibility a bit, seeing Rue as this kind of enforcer of all the women, because she's just nothing. She's just a skinny little girl. I didn't really understand that, but I loved the scene where she just admitted to the other stripper that the girl overdosed, her best friend overdosed. I thought that was really heartbreaking, because you see in these films, all of these TV series all the time, they keep secrets from each other and all of a sudden it comes out. But I just love it when someone just tells the truth. I thought that was great. And she is definitely a live wire, this girl. And now she is in a rehab, and we're not so sure that it's a rehab. It seems like it's almost just kind of a trash heap for Alamo's used up women, which is quite sad.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there's some the really dark version of this where he goes and like kills these women theoretically there, disappears them completely. But for all I know, he's going to smuggle them over the border to Mexico or something, into some form of indebted servitude in, some other way. Because I'm like, if he wanted to kill her, he could have easily gotten rid of her some other way, instead of like tricking her into, like, it's just too elaborate a plan to trick her to going into this rehab. And then, and that's all there is. And of course, or maybe this is just a really scuzzy rehab. And this is just people who, again, this is all just one scam after another. The rehab itself is just another scam. And it is legitimate, right? We see an actual ambulance roll in, but maybe it's just, once again, it's just like, this is what happens, right? Like you just like are just another piece of chattel that is being moved from one place to the other, and someone's monetizing you in some way. Even these rehab clinics that probably give you terrible service. But I hope nothing that horrible happens to her. But it is very worrying, where it's just like, do you need to fill out the paperwork? Like, nope, no paperwork required. Like, I don't know about that.
It's very shady, because Rue has seen the ins and outs of many rehabs in her short life, and she was very upset at the presentation of this one.
Yeah, this looks like the worst one ever. She's trying to like tell her, I've been to rehabs before too, and then she's just like, well, not this, like not like this. So, we'll see. It could also just be her own guilt that is painting it in such a negative way, but I don't know. I think that this is like probably not going to go well for this poor girl. And of course, one more thing with Rue is the big reunion with
Jules.
Jules, of course, yes. So what'd you think about this scene between the two of them? I like that the way it begins, where it's like, has it ever worked out well between two of us? This idea that they never worked as a couple, and they've actually hung out quite some times, a few times since then, and it hasn't worked out, and it seems to have become non-sexual. But then she says, "Hey, why don't you take slip into the bath with me?" So of course that is an interesting turn of events, but it's never worked out before. And she has an addictive personality and appears to have gotten addicted to Jules in season 2. So when she actually was able to land her in some way. So what do you think about their dynamic, and what do you think about this payoff?
Yeah, I love Rue and Jules as friends. I think they work really well as friends. I just wanted to see them in a platonic friendship. But yeah, Jules does not look happy in her situation. She's grown up a bit. She's lost whatever innocence she retained. And I'm interested to see who is her sugar daddy, who's got another family somewhere, but sets her up in a beautiful penthouse apartment. Yeah, it's going to end badly for everyone involved, I think, if Rue hops in that bath where it looks like she's going to do that. But yeah, bring it back to them being friends, because it was just so joyful in maybe the first season of Euphoria, when they just discovered each other as friends rather than lovers. But yeah, it's going to be all bad.
Yes, unfortunately, I have a feeling that it's going to be another real problem for Rue, as it's always been. And yeah, intriguing again, this idea that, going back to the main theme of the show, that, she's gotten into this relationship because this is basically a patron who was helping her with her art. But of course, strings attached. And now she's a kept woman. And, it might even be, it might be true what she's saying, that like the wife knows about it, and this is just kind of the arrangement they have. But again, it's another very much a cultural divide, right? We were just talking about earlier how, if you own assets in the United States, and this is probably the case in Australia as well, as like a first world country, that if you were lucky enough to buy a house when interest rates were 4% and before housing prices increased by 50%, and you were able to get a job before AI started to steal away entry-level jobs, that you were in a pretty solid situation. Just being in that generation by default, you don't even have to be a billionaire. You can just kind of coast generationally. And we are in that generation where things are relatively good for us. Like, if you did things right and you got to college and you got a decent job, that you're doing pretty well later in your life. And then, like you mentioned with your kids, and I worry about this with my daughter as well, and my nephews who are dealing with this right now in this very moment, out of college now and unable to find really solid work, any kind of entry-level work that has some kind of career path attached to it, and have gone to college and they've done things that they thought the right way, and their opportunities are not there. The unemployment rate for these kids in the United States is like 25% or something of college graduates that are coming right out of college. So it's an absolute nightmare. And you think about that, and here is another girl in that age range who has this older man be her patron, she's going to be an artist. She's going to do this and the other thing. That's not what she's doing. She's really just basically being paid for services by someone who's much wealthier than her and has all the power in the relationship, I would assume. I'm sure we'll see more of that. But it is, again, the theme of what we've seen over and over again with all these shows, and here again in this show.
And how's the contradiction of Maddie when she talks about Jules, and she's also talking about her models that she gets heaps of followers for? She could do all this, but she's not a hooker. As she said, I'm not a hooker.
Yes. Yeah. That's the other thing that's fascinating, by the way. I'm glad you circled back to that, because I like the fact that like everybody is not a bad person, because it's like Alamo's not the bad guy. It's I forget her name, but the drug dealer who currently owns, this is very problematic, she's mine, right? This idea that Rue is theirs, these two white people saying she's mine, and this black guy saying, I'm taking her away from you because, we're going to trade one girl for another, which is problematic in its own way. But, racializing it on top of that is even worse. Very funny, by the way, that the bigger insult is being called a pig. but there's a whole racial aspect to that as well. But also the idea that it's like those people are the bad people. I'm not the bad person. And Rue's not the bad person, right? She's just trying to get out of her circumstance, even though like she's covering up this girl who died, and maybe even soft selling this other girl into this quote unquote rehab. And maybe that's the job she has, is to do, she even says it at one point, hey, let me use my feminine wiles here, like softer touch. So maybe Alamo knows that. And so it's like, yeah, we can use her. I'll get what I want in a less upfront way. But she's like, I'm not the bad guy. He's the bad guy, right? And Maddie's not the prostitute. She's the prostitute. She's like one step removed from that person. And the girl's like, well, I don't want to do pornography. And she's just like, oh no, you're just going to like hint at pornography. You're not actually going to do pornography. And everybody's just like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not the bad guy. But of course, the irony is like, then they step into the next role and they're like, well, I'm not the bad guy now, even though I'm doing the job that was supposedly the bad guy, in my previous analysis, because now I got another person to point at. They're the bad guy, right? And it's like this pecking order of manipulation and scams and cons and lies. And it's what's happening again with Jules as well, right? She's not a prostitute, but she is a prostitute. That's basically what her job has become.
Yeah, so it's the lies that you're telling yourself to operate in this world. Someone who's kind of the moral center, who we haven't seen much of, is the Apatow girl.
Yes, Maud
Apatow. Yeah, Lexi. So yeah, we saw her last episode very briefly, just to kind of as a bit of a bridge into this season. But yeah, I think she was mentioned, but she wasn't there last night. So she is a good person, and I don't think she has anything really that negative at all. She's a good person living in a bad world, and yeah, we don't see any of her.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see what they're going to do with her character, because she, in general, on this show, has been that moral compass for Rue, for Cassie. She's never has transgressed in that way. She wrote the play in season 2, but she took this very negative thing and she turned it into something positive. And I think that was like a real silver lining to that season as well, because she was able to take these ugly things, and you saw like Cassie's reaction to seeing herself presented in that play. She got so angry and hurt, but then by the end, she's like laughing, and there she realizes that it was actually a more tender representation of her than she anticipated. So it is about the transformation that art can do. And maybe they'll use her the same way. I mean, she's in Hollywood now, so maybe Rue writes a screenplay and this all turns into a movie. Who knows? And they all live happily ever after. I hope that's where this lands. That, it's a double-edged sword of like the depravity of California, but then like the dream machine that California is as well. So maybe there's something there, but she is in next week's episode. She's in the trailer. And I think it's going to be a very heavy episode with her in it. So we might see her post-COVID, life that like we've seen with these other characters, kind of like fast forward 5 years, and we've kind of seen it for multiple characters so far. Maybe her next week was going to show some of that as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I just remembered Sharon Stone was her boss in the first episode. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of her. And I'm glad that you're thinking very positively about the end. I think there's going to be a few carcasses along the way.
I agree.
I'm not sure who's going to come out the most positive. But yeah, it's going to be a ride. A short ride, but hopefully a very entertaining one.
Short ride should maybe the appropriate for all of this. Let's talk about the Cal scene really briefly. I know we're probably running out of time, but I did want to touch back on it. I do agree, by the way, it's terrible. I mean, I guess it's nice to see Eric Dane here. He actually gives a pretty solid performance. I just read this today, but apparently he offered to be in the show, and they're like, we will put you in the show no matter what your condition happens to be. And of course, he was already having trouble walking and talking. So they have him sitting most of the time, and they have him very drunk to cover up the slurring of words. And so, but it is such an absolute tragedy, that real life story, that it is slightly distracting, I have to say. But I don't know how else you would address it, obviously. But it just adds gravitas here that is probably unintentional, but it's interesting. But it's, if anything, distracts from what is interesting about that scene. I like the fact that he is still unable to like be completely honest with his son, even though his son is directly confronting him with like, you're still not admitting who you really are. And he's just like, I was just a hedonist, which of course is a lie. We saw that flashback episode. We know that like is basically his first love was another boy. So, and by the way, being a hedonist, hooking up with guys, that's not like he was hooking up with kids. And he's lucky he's not in prison right now, right? So
that's very true. Yeah, he's not gay. He's a hedonist. But
that's right.
Yeah,
So
you can be both. You can be everything. And I think he was very lucky he's not in jail. Yeah, that's the word I used earlier. Is distracting. It was a slightly distracting seeing him on screen, but I think it's great. I think it adds a lot of different elements to it, and I loved it. I hope to see a little bit more of him.
Yeah, he's definitely in the wedding as well. By the way, there is scenes of him in next week's episode, unless that was just a teaser for the season. But I'm pretty sure that was next week's episode they were teasing there. So, but he definitely will be in more of the show for sure.
Yeah, I just don't want to see him and Jules together anymore.
Well, not in that way, but he does see Jules in next week's episode. They do encounter each other at the wedding, but no, not in that way. I hope not. Anyway. Jeez, hope not. Yeah. So that all remains to be seen. So yeah, it's, there's obviously a lot going on here. I'm fascinated by it, even, and where it's going, where it's, where it's all headed. I prefer a more subtle style in my general opinion of things. But of course, that's not where you're signing up for Euphoria. It's not like the previous seasons were subtle in many ways. I mean, you're like you said, you're just along for the ride. And did you want to say anything about your first 4 episodes of Beef? How are you enjoying it? Your wife, a huge fan of the first season, I should say, as was I, as was me, as was I, my wife and I as well. We binged the whole thing. We got through it. But you guys got it about halfway through. So how are you enjoying it so far? And what do you think?
Yes, we've watched 4 episodes of Beef. And yeah, like you, both massive fans of the first season. Loved Ali Wong in that. All new characters this season. I thought the first couple of episodes took a while to really work out what's going on and how these couples interact with each other. And I'm still not fully on board with Carey Mulligan's character. Yeah. But I'm stretching it. I'm trying to see what she was like when she was younger and her and Oscar Isaac's character got together and how they were very ambitious, but no kids, but really wanting to get to the top in their chosen fields. But I'm still not on board with her, which is affecting my enjoyment of the series. But then episode 3, everyone showed themselves to be kind of stupid and a bit dumb, which is hilarious. And then the 4th episode, which we just watched last night, was a great one. Fantastic. I think I said, it's the pit in Beef, in the emergency room. And Kaylee Spaney is doing career best work. Really She's absolutely stunning. And I'm fully into this series just because of her. She's awesome. And her partner, Charles Melton, I think his name, he's fun as well. So fun. Yeah. Oh my God. And that blonde nurse, I'm all with him. Don't want to talk to that blonde nurse. She can go away. Horrible. But I'm sure it's going to come out. But I thought it was funny that he's Korean, but is he? Because he just wanted to find a Filipino in the hospital to help him. And once he found that Filipino man, he was happy. Yeah, I'm really interested to see where this season goes, because with Beef, it can go anywhere, especially, deep in the forest on mind-altering drugs or something like the first season. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching the rest of it. Yeah, but a slow start for me.
Yeah, I agree. The first, I like the setup and I like the world building in those first couple episodes. But by episode 2, a little long to get to where it was going. The 4th episode for me, the best of the entire season. I really liked that 4th episode. And we could talk about the rest of it when you finish. But I was a little I still think it's a good season of show, but I didn't love where it landed. I mean, it's odd because the very ending I thought was very solid, but getting there, I'm like, kind of like it was overly convoluted to get to where it was going, in my opinion. And maybe, maybe I should say, not maybe, definitely Beef season 1 was also kind of outlandish in some of the decisions that were made. But for some reason it just made sense in the world they were building. And some of this doesn't quite work. And maybe it's because I didn't connect with the cast the way I really loved Stephen Yoon's character and Ali Wong as much in season 1. Just love those characters. Maybe I didn't have that here. Maybe having these being couples and then having like 3 couples paralleling each other was a little too blurry for me. Like it wasn't as clean as just this like road rage event. So I think it was interesting. By the way, speaking of like a generational divide, we touched on it briefly in the conversation. I love this revelation from the creator of the show. Season 1 was based on something that actually happened to him, where he had this road rage incident and then it escalated. Nothing like it is in the show, obviously, but in his mind, he used that as a seed to spin it out. Like, could you imagine this thing just wouldn't stop? It would just keep going back and forth. And then he kind of took it to the nth degree for that first season. For the second season, he had a somewhat similar personal story, which was that he had witnessed a really ugly fight at a party or something. And there was a younger couple there. And they were saying to him, can you believe that? Like, it's horrible. We need to call the police. And he, being older, was like, yeah, people fight. And and he's like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should accept this type of behavior, right? And that became like the genesis of this, these two couples dealing with things in a very different way. But what I'll say, which is interesting about the show as you watch it, is that you're starting to see, you will start to see these characters as not only paralleling each other, but you start to realize that they're like, it's as if they're visiting a younger version of themselves or an older version of themselves. And the show very much intentionally starts to like kind of swirl those things together. And they start to say dialogue that they obviously aren't repeating each other's dialogue. They're saying things that they couldn't have been present for, that the other couple has said. And it's interesting how it starts playing with these themes. So it's good. Not as strong as season 1, but finish it and then we can talk about it in the next episode.
Yeah, well, season 1, that was a high watermark for television in
so
general.
Great. So, yes, one of the great shows for sure. Yeah, agreed.
But so funny when Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan are having the fight, they're just having a scream out fight that they seem like they often do, but to see it back on that mobile phone footage, they're actually quite shocked at what they're seeing each other do to each other. It's really interesting to see that. And another thing that I really enjoy is the way that the younger couple talk to each other, and they kind of drop in a few little phrases that are quite popular with Gen Z right now. And
right.
And it's super funny the way they do it, and so earnestly. Yeah, really fun.
They're all messed up in their own way still. That fight, by the way, I love that how they play it out afterwards. Like they react to having been caught in the act of that ugly fight. And they're like, hey, people fight. Like they're blowing it off like no big deal. But I mean, like that fight, even as before we see the recording, even just us watching it as viewers, I'm like, that fight crossed the line for sure. They better not be fighting like that on a regular basis. That is a truly horrendous, really ugly fight.
Yeah, there's violence in words as well as action.
Oh, and okay, one more bit of homework for you. Okay, go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking if anyone recorded the fights that I have with my wife, it could be interesting to watch back, and I think we'd both be quite ashamed with some of the things we say.
Let's get a Ring camera in the house so you can watch it back later. One more piece of homework for you. You might be interested in this. This is week to week, so you only have to watch 1 week because it's on HBO. And HBO only does 1 week drops. It's premiering on Thursday here, so I guess it'll be your Friday morning. It is Half Man. Have you heard about this?
I have not, no.
This is from the creator of Baby Reindeer.
Amazing.
And it is his new project, and it is coming to HBO Max. He stars in it and wrote it and directed it. He's huge. He got completely jacked for this. And it is him and... Now I got to pull up the cast here. These are famous people.
Jamie Bell.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, this is a must watch because Baby Reindeer was all time. So, it's this guy, Richard Gadd. So, HBO. You've already got me.
HBO. Yeah. So this is, the Pit just wrapped up. So this is their Thursday. It's weird. HBO has their HBO Sunday nights premieres. And then they have HBO Max, which was a separate product. And they've kind of merged the two together. But HBO Max premieres on Thursday. So The Pit is actually HBO Max, believe it or not. So, but it's all HBO now. Whatever. Whatever that means. But this is the Pit just wrapped up last week. Massively popular season of TV, obviously. And now this is their segue into this. And of course, Baby Reindeer, massive phenomena. They got Richard Gadd to his next project. So, of course, a really big deal. BBC as a co-producer, just like they were for Baby Reindeer. And this is, if you read the byline on this, it's a really fascinating project. It's these two brothers who basically adopted brothers who live together. And it's like like the more intellectual and sensitive kid and this like brutish older bully who also protects him. And then it's like these two versions of masculinity, like at war with each other, but codependent with each other, and that their like lives together. It covers decades of their lives together. So anyway, so it sounds like a really fascinating project. And Baby Reindeer was such a unique and strange project that I'm very, really curious about this.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, how do you even try to top what you've done before with this? I mean, it's like a second album syndrome. Hopefully we get something completely different. And yeah, I'm in already. I don't care what it's about, but I'm going to see what this guy has brought to life.
Yeah, exactly. And so check that out. And we can discuss it next week. We'll try to talk about Euphoria, episode 3, which is going to be a wedding episode. So it'll probably be a long conversation. And we're going to talk about the follow-up to Baby Reindeer. And we're going to try to talk about the end of Beef as well. Probably will not do justice to all those topics, but we'll try to figure it out.
But there's something. If you don't like Euphoria, there's something. So listen.
There'll be something for everybody. That's right. Something for everybody. So do tune in. Even if you quit Euphoria, keep listening to us. All right, Darren. Oh, by the way, the drama is from A24 and also will be on everything on A24 is under HBO. So it'll be premiering on there, whenever it comes to streaming. All that is to say that anybody who's not going to see this in theaters, we will have a full spoiler conversation when it premieres on HBO, whenever that happens. So at some point, probably 2 months from now, we'll have that conversation.
Oh, it's so great. Excellent. Well worth talking about.
All right, great. Okay. Thanks, Darren. Have a great day.
Cheers, Victor. Have a great night. Bye.
You too.